A warm welcome to Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. This week, another coup in Africa sets the ball rolling for a call for leaders to do better. Gabon's new junta took power in the night Ali Bongo was declared president, a third time since he came into power in 2009 when his father, Omar Bongo, died. As we've seen in Niger, people rejoiced, grateful that the Bongo dynasty has come to an end, and turning their hopes onto the man they believe will lead them into genuine political leadership, General Brice Oligui Nguema. We'll be learning more about him later. Speaking of later, this one I discussed with former Nigerian ambassador to Switzerland and the Principality of Liechtenstein and former permanent representative of Nigeria to the United Nations Office and other international organizations in Geneva, Dr. Humphrey Orjiako. It's clear that African leaders need to face good governance squarely, not just to prevent coups, but to ensure the consolidation of democracy on the continent, because in reality, it is still the best system of governance. That's Diplomatic Channel in a wrap. A quick check on other discussions in diplomatic circles, and we'll be right back. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has recalled the country's ambassadors. The information came in a statement by Al-Qasim Abdul-Qadir, the Special Assistant on Media and Communication Strategy to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Tuga, reading: Sequel to the inquiries on the letter recalling the Nigerian ambassador to the UK, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Maitama Tuga, has reaffirmed that all carrier ambassadors and non-carrier ambassadors have been recalled on the instruction of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Ambassadors, as representatives of the country, they serve at the behest of the President, and it's his prerogative to send or recall them from any country. The Nigerian High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, Ambassador Sarafa Tunji Ishola, who was appointed by former President Muhammadu Buhari in January 2021, was recalled by President Tinubu. All 7 ambassadors except Nigeria's United Nations permanent representatives in New York and Geneva are expected back in the country by October 31st, 2023.
Préserver le respect de l'état de droit.
The military rulers in Gabon have announced a reopening of the country's land, sea and air borders with immediate effect. The borders were closed after the officers announced they had overthrown President Ali Bongo on Wednesday, August 30, ending the Bongo family dynasty's almost 6 decades in power. Military spokesman Colonel Ulrich Manfumbi said the borders were being reopened in order to promote the continuity of the state while demonstrating a firm will to fulfill international commitments.
Maritime et aérienne.
Finally, Japan has extended a $100 million loan to help Jordan's electricity sector reforms as part of Tokyo's support for the kingdom's IMF-guided reforms. Japan's Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi met with his Jordanian counterpart Ayman Safadi at the start of his visit to Jordan. Japan is one of Jordan's main donors, contributing over $4 billion in loans, aid, and technical support in recent decades. Welcome back. African leaders are scratching their heads over what to do about Gabon. The people support the coup, but leaders have called for a return to civilian rule. The junta, on the other hand, is moving like it does have a plan.
Ce jour, 30 août 2023.
On this day, August 30, 2023, with the Defense and Security Forces meeting within the Committee for the Transition and Restoration of Institutions, CTRI, on behalf of the Gabonese people and the guarantor of the protection of institutions, have decided to defend peace by putting an end to the current regime. The general elections of August 26, 2023, as well as the truncated results are cancelled. The borders are closed until further notice. All institutions of the Republic are dissolved.
This was the early hours of Wednesday, August 30, 2023, when instead of Gabon hearing the familiar voice of Ali Bongo, The country's president, whom the electoral body announced as winner of the just concluded elections, the people heard the voice of the military announcing their takeover of power.
Aujourd'hui,
appearing on television, the officers said they represented all security and defense forces in the Central African nation.
et social. Aussi,
They said the election results were cancelled, all borders closed until further notice, and state institutions dissolved.
élection générale.
Just days before, citizens headed to the polls for presidential, legislative and local elections that the opposition hoped would foil President Ali Bongo's bid for a third term and end his family's 56-year grip on power. Of Bongo's 18 challengers, 6 from major opposition parties have backed a joint nominee in an effort to narrow the race. The opposition had denounced the August 26 vote as fraudulent, which Bongo's campaign denied. But a lack of international observers, the suspension of some foreign broadcast, and the authorities' decision to cut internet service and impose a nighttime curfew nationwide raised concerns about transparency of the election. While the opposition may never see its candidate in office, the people rejoiced at Bongo's ouster. People waved Gabonese flags and chanted, "Free the country." And where was Ali Bongo? The military officers said in a statement on national TV they had detained him.
Honneur et fidélité à la patrie, je vous remercie.
Bongo later released a video calling on supporters and friends to make noise about his ouster. He said he had no idea where family members were.
So I'm calling you to make noise, really.
The junta named General Brice Oligui Nguema as transitional leader.
Retrouver avec des mêmes erreurs.
5 years ago, General Nguema barely existed in Gabon's public consciousness, having spent 10 years outside the country after being dismissed from the inner circle of the Bongo family. Upon his return, he quietly rose to the army's highest position and dedicated his days to maintaining President Bongo's regime. He hailed from the same province as the Bongo's family. Some say he is Ali Bongo's cousin. General Nguema, as an ambitious young officer, attracted the attention of the military top brass and became an assistant to then-President Omar Bongo, whom he served until Bongo died in 2009. Following his 10-year disappearance from the scene, he returned in 2018 to replace the president's step-brother as the Republicans' Guards intelligence chief. Barely 8 months ago, State News reported that General Nguema publicly reaffirmed his loyalty to Ali Bongo's presidency, which had stretched for 14 years. International condemnation have trailed the coup in Gabon. Nigerian president through the special advisor to the president on media and publicity, Ajuri Ngalale. He said the president's belief that the rule of law and a faithful recourse to the constitutional resolution of electoral disputes must not be allowed to perish in Africa. The African Union condemned the coup and ordered the military to immediately return to the barracks and to unconditionally return power to the civilian authority, uphold their constitutional mandate and the principle of constitutionalism, and refrain from any interference in the political process in Gabon. The AU's Peace and Security Council on Thursday suspended Gabon following the coup. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres condemned the coup and called on all involved to exercise restraint, engage in an inclusive and meaningful dialogue, and ensure that the rule of law and human rights are fully respected. While France not only condemned the coup, but called for the election results to be respected.
L'évolution de la situation sur place.
On Friday, coup leader General Brice Nguema said his aim is to avoid elections that repeat the same mistakes as pressure mounts for a return to civilian rule. During his first public address, he said the military has changed attitudes in Africa, blaming politicians and international organizations of the current realities and accusing them of doing nothing while corruption thrives.
Et ça revient la même chose.
He, however, said Gabon will respect all its commitment with its national and international partners, as well as all bilateral and multilateral agreements that promote the development of the Gabonese people.
C'est vous, les politiciens, qui êtes responsables.
Joining me now is Dr. Orjiako, a former Nigerian ambassador to Switzerland and the Principality of Liechtenstein. He's also a former permanent representative of Nigeria to the United Nations Office and other international organizations in Geneva. He joins me now from Abuja. Ambassador Orjiako, thank you for joining us on Diplomatic Channel.
It's my pleasure to join you, Maharaji. Thank you.
We're discussing the coup in Gabon. While it did not come as a surprise to a number of analysts, and I know for you in particular it was not a surprise, do you think that one of the reasons the coup took place is because it appears that there has already been a wave of coups in Africa, concentrating in Central and Western Africa?
Yes, these coups have come in the wake of what started in the Sudan and the Arab Spring and the emergence of these Sahelian jihadist movements pushing into West and Central Africa, and the inability of the former colonial controller, France, to hold them at bay. That has given a very good reason for some of the Francophone African countries to begin to at last express themselves in terms of freedom. If you listen to the events in Libreville immediately after the coup, the noise was liberated. The question we Africans should be asking is, liberated from what? Liberated from what? In the specific case of Gabon, it is liberation from what one could call a hereditary presidency. If one family had ruled a country like Gabon since 1967, that is like 56 years of rule by one family. That's some kind of monarchical system in which the presidency is inherited from father to son. I think that was the first aspect of that happy shouting on the streets, liberated from the Bongo family, Bongo Odimbo, Ali Bongo, whose father ruled for 42 years, and he took over. And this is the third term that, in fact, breaches the constitution of Gabon. And Gabon is not the only one. That is why we think that it is not the end of this emerging story. So it's not totally a surprise that having taken place in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea, lately even in Chad, and lately in Niger Republic, it has now migrated to Central Africa. And that may not be the end of it, simply because the very circumstances that prevail in these countries where coups have taken place are also clearly evident in these other countries. And let's not just restrict it to Francophonia and begin to assume that it won't happen in Anglophone Africa or anywhere else. It will. The second aspect of that liberated shout to get on the streets, I think, was about liberation from France itself. Because I believe that, yes, many of these Francophone African countries got their political independence from France in the 1960s. But take a look at it. France still controls, in fact, has full control over all their international financial transactions and dealings. That is not financial independence. The Central Bank of France still controls the central banks of these countries as if they were just its vassals. So you could see that political freedom in Francophone Africa has not translated to fiscal freedom or economic liberty. It hasn't happened.
The different junta have given different timelines for them to return to democratic process, beg your pardon, and then return democratic rule. Gabon hasn't mentioned any, but the last I think was Niger, which said about 3 years. So the real question is, what system of governance then works best for Africa? Because I've asked this question before, and this was like many years ago. I think when it was probably Sudan, or I don't remember which particular country it was that had a coup back then. And it seemed like, Africa struggles with democracy. Africa struggles with military rule, which seems like the alternative, to a system of governance that seems to work. Some have suggested that maybe Africans should return to monarchical rule, because there seemed to be little dissent then, against the system of governance.
The problem with the African situation is that there was never a homegrown system of governance that was allowed to mature and stabilize before colonialism intervened and then retruncated various peoples and various countries and created them into colonial possessions, which ultimately got political independence without the full benefits of the culture, of imbibing the culture of the rule of law in a centralized form. Democracy is about the rule of law. African traditional societies, each and every one of them, had operated under some form of organizational rule of law. So democracy cannot in itself be the problem. Probably the problem with practice of democracy in the continent is the shortcut to governance which many leaders adopt. When it is convenient, they preach the rule of the Constitution, the supremacy of the Constitution, and the rule of law. When it is inconvenient, they routinely and serially disregard the very rule of law they preach. They ignore court judgments. They let aside a court says somebody is free to go on bail. You still detain him. You still keep him. Those are the things that are making democracy appear as if it is impracticable in Africa. But they are. Take countries like Botswana, where there is a much higher respect for the rule of law, for the equity and the equalities that a democratic society provides to its citizens. The incidence of coup making is not been experienced by such countries. So actually, the problem with Africa is not democracy per se in itself. It is the misapplication of the values and principles of democracy. If people do not have confidence in the process of giving power to a particular political party or particular persons, if the majority of the people have a feeling that this is not who we wanted to govern over us, we're going to have a problem. Yes. So the practice and the process of democracy is important. It could work if those things are observed, not in the breach.
Yeah, I think it's becoming clearer, with the number of coups that have happened in Central and in Western Africa now, that the problem is the leadership. The problem is the leadership. And I think that, a number of analysts have also alluded to that. And it's becoming pretty clear even to those other leaders who have been in office for more than 10 years. I'm talking about the Cameroonian president, Paul Biya, the Rwandan President Paul Kagame, Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, the Omar Gule of Djibouti, and so on. And those ones are afraid, that there could be military intervention in their countries. In fact, the Cameroonian president and the Rwandan president, they try to mitigate that by changing, the ministers of defense and then changing some service chiefs. Not sure how much of a help that will be. What exactly can they do, especially for those who have been in positions of authority as presidents, as heads of state for more than 10 years and still hope to remain in office, specifically in the case of Rwanda, because things seem to be going on well in that country. But you cannot deny the fact that you have a president who's been there for more than 20 years.
The idea of tenure elongation is one of the major breaches of the democratic process that is also a cause of a problem. It doesn't matter if a leader is said to be practicing good governance, as many people think that President Kagame is doing in Rwanda. Well, I have been to Rwanda. It is almost always easy to conclude when you see a flashy capital city. You haven't been to the hinterland. You haven't been to the provinces. You haven't asked the people, the inhabitants, the citizens, how they feel. That is important. That's the major part of democracy. If democracy is for the good and the welfare of the people, then, of course, that should be the first principle of governance, to ensure that the people are contented with the actions, the practice of government, the practice of governance. Yes, flashy buildings and beautiful aesthetic edifices in the city, that is nice. Smooth infrastructure is also very good. But these things are built for man. Man cannot be built for them, So the human being in these countries must begin to feel that democracy is working for them. If there is that level of poverty and the income per capita in Rwanda is barely $2,000, and it could be much more than that. Yes, Kagame may be doing better than others in trying to pacify, stabilize, and unify the country. But staying in power for more than 10 years, 20 years, and all that is an assumption of a certain kind of indispensability, and it doesn't work. It does not work. And the answer they are trying to provide, change the ministers of defense, change the generals, change the army military hierarchy, that is not a solution to the problem. The solution to the problem is to bring about good governance in the first place. The second thing is obey the Constitution and the rule of the law. Nobody should be above the law. In fact, in a situation where there is good government, good governance, where the laws are supreme in any country, if any group of soldiers make a coup, the people will also go out on the streets and shout the opposite. They want their freedom back, they want their government back, they want democracy back. That is the way it should be. Probably that's why in the Western countries from where we are said to have copied democracy or have given it to us, the thought of making a coup does not seem to be very popular. I don't know of any Western country that has been through a coup in recent times. And that's the reason, because there is a prevalence of the rule of law. The leadership obeys the Constitution. They obey the rule. The law applies to every citizen equally. That is democracy. And that is what Africa should be aspiring to. And that way, the spate of coups may dissipate. Otherwise, if it is just change of personnel from time to time, because you're afraid they are not from your own tribe, they are not from your political loyalists, they are not from your religious group, so maybe they will make it. That's not going to work. Soldiers also feel the pain that citizens feel, the discontent in any society where governance is not working but only for the leadership. That's a problem. That of Gabon is very clear. Gabon, the disparity between the rich and the poor, the income distribution in these countries is virtually a crime. It's criminal. In many African countries, where the ostentatious living of the political class is contrasts very sharply with the miserable life that the citizens live. That, I think, is the better approach to resolving the issues that cause coups in Africa than saying, oh, democracy is not good, democracy is not the answer. I think democracy is good. Democracy is the answer to so many questions. But it should be democracy and not an imitation of democracy. A hereditary presidency or a rigged out election is not democracy. I think that's what it's about.
Ambassador Humphrey Orjiako, thank you so much. I have so many more questions in my head, but this is where we'll end it. I hope you'll join us again when we have a topic similar to this and others to discuss here on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you so much, Amarachi, for having me. Thank you.
This is where we end the program this week. Remember, you can always watch this episode and others that you may have missed on youtube.com/channelsweb. Just go to the playlist, search for Diplomatic Channel, and click on the episode you wish to watch. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.